Yes, Coffee Conversations with Greg J is on. Good morning. Hope you had a great Memorial Day weekend. Took a moment to be peaceful. It's been stressful the last couple of weeks in the news, yeah? I'm going to talk about it today. Mass shootings, gun control. Personally, I took a break from social media and news, well, a little bit of news. When I came in this morning, first thing, gun control, gun control, gun control, you know. But something needs to happen in this country. Mass shootings. A couple weeks ago, guy went into grocery store in the neighborhood, Buffalo, New York, shot and killed 10 people. Same weekend, guy goes into the church, Laguna Hills, California, shoots up the church. I think he killed 1 or 2 people there, injured like 9. And then 21 souls in Texas, 19 children, 2 teachers. Something's got to be done. Everybody, last week was talking gun control. This week, all the politicians and everything. But I just want to examine the issue, our community too. When we look in our community, much violence all over, what's going on? What is going on? I think oftentimes we forget about the toll that this takes on families who have lost children to violence in our community, in our world. In my work across the communities, one of my favorite, beloved organizations that I just linked up with is the Justice for Murdered Children organization. And LaWanda Hawkins is here this morning. And let me bring her in and see if we can wrap our brains around what is happening in our community. LaWanda, good morning.
Good morning, Greg, and thanks for having me on this morning.
Yes. Such a thing when you saw all of the violence that's been happening across the news. An advocate like you've been on this case for a long time, supporting families. What were your thoughts when you saw what was happening last week?
I couldn't believe it. It was like a nightmare. It was like, this can't be happening here, not in America. I thought I was looking at another country.
Mm-hmm.
It was just unbelievable what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
Our kids being under attack, but not just there. What has just been happening in this country regarding all these guns and all these victims? It's heartbreaking, and it's devastating that we don't see an outcry, especially in minority communities, because in all 3 cases that you mentioned, all 3 of the victims were minorities.
Mm-hmm. Isn't it something? I mean, man, I just wanted to bring everybody together this morning just because I don't think anybody has any one answer, right? We live in a country where I guess, guns is a constitutional right of folks. We're seeing they're tracing back how these suspects, even purchased their guns and everything. And, there was, I know they had a big convention out there with the NRA and people were fighting and protesting and whatnot. They try to keep their rights. But, what do you say, LaWanda? Before you answer that question, tell the people a little bit about your organization, Justice for Murdered Children.
Okay. Justice for Murdered Children is a nonprofit organization located here in Los Angeles, where we assist families who have had a loved one murdered. Unfortunately, the only way to be a member of this organization is to have a loved one murdered, and no one in wants to be a member. Everyone in wants out.
Mm-hmm.
It's the worst position to be in. Nothing's worse than having your child life taken. It's
Mhm.
supposed to be the opposite. Parents supposed to bury their children. I mean, children supposed to bury their parents. Parents don't supposed to bury their children. And
Mhm.
this is way out of line. But what we're seeing here right now with gun violence, especially in minority communities, especially in our communities here in Los Angeles, it's out of control. And I don't think it should be a political issue, but they're making it, and they're making it political. And I don't like that because it's public safety. It's not a
Mhm.
Republican or Democratic issue, it's a public safety issue. And just like we look at public health, we have to look at public safety. It's the same.
You got a point there because it's hey, went to the movies over the weekend, and I gotta admit, cross my mind. I'm looking around the lobbies to see, we checking where the exit is. It's a thing.
Yes, most definitely. We all need to be concerned. And we
Mhm.
need to have more education regarding this. And we don't
Mhm.
see the education and the funding like they talk about. Well, it's not coming into our communities. And when it is brought in, it's brought in by others that are
Mhm.
bringing it into our community, not those who are on the ground who are dealing with it on a day-to-day basis. Oh, no, they're not reaching out to them and say, hey, let you all go in because you're the ones who have been affected.
Mhm. 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 Mhm.
Yeah, there
Let
should be
me let
some
me.
form of education.
I see my friend Craig DeLuz in there. He's ringing our doorbell. Let me bring him in. He's up there in the Northern California school board member, great political observer, and a gun rights advocate also, So Craig, good morning.
Pleasure to be with you today. I apologize for taking a little bit to get on. It's been a busy couple of weeks with interviews and whatnot.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I know. It's, last time you were here with us, we were analyzing the recall election. And, we did say that we wanted to circle back around and examine, this whole thing about gun rights. And, I was like, well, here we are. I mean, you're an educator, a school board, education policymaker,
Yes.
as well as a gun rights advocate. And I've been thinking about you going, man, I wonder what he is contemplating in this day and time. Can you share with us?
Well, first of all, it's a multifaceted thing because this is, unfortunately, what happened in Uvalde, Texas, is not, it's not the first time. But there have been shootings. There was one here in Sacramento, about a month ago, a little less than a month ago, where individuals basically shot up downtown at the closing of clubs. And,
Mhm.
as people start talking and start getting into, well, solutions, the first thing that happens is people say we have to do something.
Mhm.
And I'm not going to say that we don't need to do something, but there's a couple of things that we have to make sure that we do. Number one, we have to make sure that in each of these cases, we wait until all of the information comes in. What happened? How did it happen? What were the things that happened leading up to it? Before we start ascribing policy solutions, right? Because oftentimes what happens is, and I see this happen almost every single time there is a shooting or something like this occurs, is the first thing that happens is people say, well, we got to do something.
Mhm.
And whether or not the policy solution that they're offering actually solves the problem, that doesn't really matter because we've got to do something. And I always liken it to this. It's like me saying my car won't start. So therefore, I need to change the tires because I've got to do something. Most of the people who are advocating and putting forth policy do not understand firearms. They do not understand firearms technology. They do not understand firearms law, and they don't understand how those things intersect. And now in this particular case at this particular school campus, there's a number of other things that we have to analyze. We didn't know early on, well, okay, what was going on at this school? What sort of policies and procedures did they have in place? What were the things that were put in place in order to protect this school from being able to from being made available to something like this? Well, there's a lot of stuff we know now that we did not know even last week. That there are a number of things that, if they were in place, would have done a lot or gone a long way in order to protect the lives of people who were there.
Mhm.
I will continue to say that this is a people problem, not a gun problem. The Second Amendment and firearms have been a part of the American lexicon since our founding. At one point, you had gun ranges at school where students could go to learn how to be good marksmen, learn how to utilize their firearms. You used to have people who could drive around with a gun rack in the back of their.
Wait, Craig.
Yeah,
where they do that at?
well, it used to be right here in California. There were plenty of schools here in California where they actually had gun ranges on school campuses. Used to be for a Boy Scout badge, you had to get your marksmanship badge, right, in order to progress in terms of being a Boy Scout. But so it's always been a part of our lexicon, but it only seems recently that we have a generation of folks who are coming up who believe that if I am angry, if I am frustrated, if I feel like an individual or the world is not treating me right or treating me fairly, that an appropriate response is violence, and violence on a large enough scale, as big a scale as possible. And that is something that, once again, has become a fairly recent thing. And that's the thing that we really need to start to deal with and understand is how do we address those things?
Craig, meet LaWanda Hawkins. She is the director of the Justice for Murdered Children organization in Los Angeles. Done so many things with her. I wanted to introduce y'all, as we're sitting here sipping coffee together and just chopping it up on behalf of our community, right? We have all sides of the spectrum here. And I think, LaWanda, I think I'm hearing Craig say this almost the same as what you're saying, is we shouldn't politicize, if you will, the issue. And it's really about the people.
You hit it right on the head. Good morning, Craig. I represent the organization again called Justice for Murdered Children down here. And as a parent of a murdered child, I'm saying we have to look at the people behind the problem. Do not make it political, because this is not a political thing. We need to blame the people who pulled the trigger. We need to hold these people accountable and quit giving excuses for this type of behavior, because we're allowing these people, and I don't want to say mentally insane and all this and that, because then you're giving them another way out of this BS. We have to hold these people accountable when they commit these type of crimes. And I mean, we as the people have to hold them accountable. And we have to hold those people who make these policies that allow these people to get away with this stuff and give them excuses. And so I understand exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
And we have to really find out what happened here, not just in Texas, but we also need to look at what happened in Buffalo, what happened in Laguna Woods, because something happened in all of these situations that allowed these people to think that they could do this.
Right.
They went out of their ways, and we got to get behind that to find out what is going. Yeah, because we know it's going to happen again. Right. And it's happening right now as we speak. Somebody else is plotting this. So we got to get behind that to figure out and let these people know that we're going to hold you accountable. We will do whatever it takes to prosecute you to the fullest. And we will not give you a smack on the hand and send you to a mental institution and say that's going to be the solution. We have to be a bit more firm.
Let me ask you, Craig, there was someone, I think Pilar Thompson is saying, the AR-15s should be used in the military. How do people, why is it so easy to get an AR-15?
Well, first of all, understand that most people don't understand that that the AR-15 is not a military weapon. It is not even a military, quote unquote. I don't know what military style means.
Right.
People oftentimes confuse the AR-15 for the M16, which is an automatic. Which is an automatic weapon, which without the exception of a very special and hard to get license, an individual cannot own in the country, definitely can't own in the state of California, once again, without a very, very special and hard to get license. So that's the first thing. In most of these cases, it's not the M16 that's being utilized. It is a centerfire. It basically is a semi-automatic rifle, meaning one trigger pull, one round. It's not dissimilar from most handguns. Most handguns, once again, are one trigger pull, one round. So in the idea that it is high capacity, that it is quote unquote high velocity, or is more dangerous than any other firearm, quite frankly, just is not so. And so I think that's the first thing to understand, is that people need to take a time to get to know and understand firearms and firearms technology before they start quoting, people who, by the way, policymakers who don't understand firearms. And you just had the president of the United States claim that a 9mm round can blow someone's lung out of their bodies. I mean, this is just false. It is just really bad information. And so the first thing we need to do is kind of come together and realize, okay, let's at least get on the same page in terms of information, right? Let's understand that. Let's talk about the AR-15. The AR-15, while it is the most popular, the most commonly owned firearm in the entire country, AR-15, well, first of all, rifles as a whole are involved in less than 3% of all gun crimes. AR-15s, an even smaller percentage than that. So, and while most crimes that are committed with firearms, most shootings are related to gangs or drugs, a small percentage of them, once again, almost none, involve the AR-15. The only reason it's become so high profile is because the media, every single time one is involved in one of these events, the media brings it up. You want to know the most commonly owned weapon or used weapon in mass shootings are handguns. They're not the AR-15, they're not long guns, and they're not rifles. But because they are easy to demonize, that's the thing that they focus on.
And then the optics look crazy scary too. When you see they just do it on a rampage with body armor and a gun that looks like a military style weapon, right?
Well, exactly. They're scary guns. In fact, most of the attributes in for example, California's assault weapons ban, most of the attributes that are there are cosmetic and don't actually lean to or address the functionality of the firearm. Most firearm technology has not changed in the last 50 years. Now there's some things that make it look a little better, make it a little easier for use, give you a little bit more options. The thing about the AR-15 is, and I know that at one point someone got mad because someone said that it was basically like the Swiss Army knife of firearms. But the thing about the AR-15 is it gives you the ability to put together a firearm that's easy for you to use. So if you are disabled, if you are smaller of stature, if you're looking to utilize it for long distance shooting or for home defense, you can put together pieces of the firearm to design it so that it can be easy for you to be able to use for whatever it is that you want to use it for. And that's really the only difference. It's not any more deadly than any other firearm.
Craig, you just said something that's been mulling in the back of my mind. I mean, we want to, you too, Lawanda, we want to, reduce guns on the street and figure out a way to try to mitigate these tragic occurrences. But at the same time, home defense needs to be job one, it sounds like to me, in these days and time, because people are losing their mind out here. I mean, how do we find the balance? Like, okay, we need to arm ourselves for home defense or self-defense, and at the same time we want to minimize how many guns are out on the street. That's a conundrum, I think, for the common man and woman.
You're hitting it right on the thing. How do we balance that when we have so many minorities being victims of gun violence on our streets, and we're not talking about that? We do not focus on that. In LA, we're over 200 and some people who have already been victims, who have already lost their lives. I'm not just talking about the victims. I'm talking about the people who have lost their lives.
Well, Lawanda, something I want to touch on with that is, and this is the thing we also have to understand, is 84% of those individuals were likely shot by another young black male. And I'm not saying that to say that they are more prevalent to gun violence against, because the reality is gun violence statistics, or when you look at it, people tend to victimize people who look like them, whether it's Asian, whether it's white, whether it's Latino, or whether it's black. The question is the why. How do we address the why? The gun is just the tool. You look at what's going on right now in countries like in Great Britain, where they've banned personal ownership of most firearms. There is an epidemic of people stabbing one another. And once again, we have to start to identify that those root causes. Like one example, for example, is one of the things we do in the school district where I'm at is we've instituted programs. We call it PBIZ, or it's about trying to help young people understand, one, their feelings, right? Number two, develop constructive ways to deal with negative feelings, right? Those anger, those frustrations. How do I, if I'm angry, if I feel like I'm being bullied, if I feel like someone is not agreeing with me, I feel like I'm being taken advantage of, or I don't have whatever it is that I want, believe that I should have. What are the constructive ways to deal with that? And what are the destructive ways? And how do we guide young people, starting from the time they're young, towards the positive decision making? I mean, that's the thing. And unfortunately, that used to be the thing that we learned in the family, at home. Those are the things that we learned at church. There used to be the things we learned at school till we, went out of our way to remove God from the schools. But I won't, that's a discussion for another day. But the idea is we need to start to, once again, continue to help people to be able to better deal with those challenging emotions, especially in this day and age, and get them to turn away from violence as the first solution, or the best solution in their eyes.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, conflict resolution in the schools is a powerful tool. I still am part of the board of directors of the West Angeles Community Development Corporation, and our founder and executive director, Dr. Lula Bolton, instituted a conflict resolution, a mediation program in public schools all across LA, South LA. It was crazy effective, right? And probably saved quite a few lives, but at the same time, our super producer, Rhonda Love, she's always talking about emotional intelligence, right? We got to kind of figure out how to harness that emotional intelligence, different ways to resolve conflicts in our community,
Most definitely. And was it last year or the year before last, we cut school police in LA Unified School District. We took a big, huge amount out of the school board for school police. I think we have to put them back in. I think we really need to enforce that again, because our schools need to be safe. Our children need to be safe. We have to make sure that we protect them just like we protect everything else in this country. We protect money. And so our children's lives have to mean just as much. And so we're asking for school police to be put back in when they go back to school in September.
One of the challenges, and I agree with you. I like the idea of both infrastructure and staff and school police on staff. That one of the challenges is that you don't often see campus police at elementary schools. I think it's one of the reasons why you see some of these elementary schools become targeted, because in the end, these people who are trying to do these things, they're looking for soft targets. They're looking for places where they're going to meet minimal resistance. And so one of the things that I'm an advocate of, and I know a lot of people agree with me on this, but there used to be a time in California where if you had a concealed carry permit, which meant that you went through a detailed background check with local law enforcement, you went through interviews with local law enforcement, you had to go through training and testing to demonstrate that you knew how to utilize your firearm safely. And you did that every 2 years, where you were able to then carry a firearm with your concealed carry permit on campus as long as the district allowed you to. And the reason why I say this is this: we have to be our own first responders, because law enforcement can't be everywhere, right? They cannot be everywhere. And oftentimes law enforcement is minutes away when seconds matter. And I'll give you an example of that. Sandy Hook took a grand total of 4 minutes for him to shoot everyone that he had shot. Over 20, something like 27 people, students and children, shot in 4 minutes. I think it's vitally important that if individuals have the training, have demonstrated the capacity, the ability, and then are willing to submit themselves to whatever else the district would require, they ought to be able to do that, be able to carry. Because I keep thinking, what if a teacher on campus, what if one of the teachers in that room had a concealed carry permit? What if they had been able to try and defend those students instead of, having them get behind desks or throwing books at them if they actually had the ability to challenge that individual. That's something that we at least need to consider. I'm not talking about arming anybody who doesn't want to, but I'm talking about people who decide they want to. And here in the Sacramento area, we used to have a district, Folsom Cordova district. They actually included their teachers or their staff members who had concealed carry permits. They included them alongside law enforcement as a part of their active shooter response plan. They actually went through the trainings. That's the sort of thing that we ought to be considering. I know a lot of people don't like that idea, but what I know is this, is where those sorts of programs are in place, there has never been a school shooting. In places where they are, where staff is prohibited from being able to own or possess firearms on campus, that's almost 100% of where school shootings take place.
I was listening to that contemplation on last week, and I was thinking, I said, man, this is what we've come down to. We go arm the teachers. So I don't know. That one is a tough one. Arm the teachers. Is that and then teachers want to be armed, I guess, eh? What do you say, Lawanda?
Yeah. My mom's a teacher, and so talking to her, she's in Arizona, and they have a right. But my concern is that the gun would have to be locked. The gun, yes, they can't. Yeah, the gun would have to be locked. That means that they would have to take a minute to unlock the gun. That's the problem. That's the delay. That's why I'm concerned.
It actually doesn't have to be locked. It would have to be on the person
while they're teaching in class.
Yeah. I'll tell you, it's the funniest thing. I remember when we still had the ability to carry in California. And once again, I've been on the school board. This is my 18th year. And I remember one of my fellow school board members said to me, they said, I just don't know if I would ever feel comfortable being around someone with a gun. Now, this was probably, I think I had already been on the board for over a decade. And I looked at him, I said, you do realize that every school board meeting, every time you've been around me at every single event, I had a gun on me. And what I explained to him was this: because we're a small district, we're a small elementary district, and we don't have the ability we don't have the budget to be able to hire armed security for our meetings or for all of the campuses. But I'm like this: if I had the ability, if someone came into our meeting and they thought they were determined to inflict violence upon the people in that meeting, there was only one individual that we knew of that would have had the ability to defend that room, and that would have been the person with the firearm.
Well, I mean, come on, Craig. You got the rare gem of the diamonds there. You are a gun advocate, so I guess, yeah, you're gonna have your weapon, but I'm trying to wrap my brain around that being the norm in an education setting.
Well, it doesn't have to be the norm where everyone has to do it. But here's the thing, ultimately, if an individual, if someone is planning a scenario where they want to go and do something like this, they're not going to go someplace where they know there's a likelihood that they'll be engaged with someone with a firearm. They're looking for a soft target. So when you say, okay, this is a gun-free zone, there are going to be no firearms here, what you're saying is you will get almost no resistance in this area. And you literally put a target on those. I mean, 93% of all mass shootings occur in gun-free zones. Now, that's for two reasons. One, because it becomes a place that they target. But secondly, if they do target a place where individuals are able to possess firearms or have a firearm, there is a greater likelihood that a citizen will be able to confront that individual and stop that individual from being able to turn it into a mass shooting, because a mass shooting has to have at least 4 or more people who are shot. Well, if 2 people get shot and they're engaged by a citizen with a firearm, and that individual either runs or is shot, then it's no longer considered a mass shooting. I mean, there was a great example in West Virginia just over the weekend where it was at a birthday party. A person came up, started shooting, and boom, a woman with a concealed carry permit took out the individual. And that was just last weekend.
So we're trying to turn this back into the wild, wild west.
And I don't think we're ready for that. I don't think we're ready for that. But I understand your position. And I do believe in certain situations that we do need to be able to protect ourselves. It's very important. But when it comes to our schools and our children being inside the schools here in LA Unified School District, from elementary all the way to you a senior, we are demanding that all schools put school police back in. We want, yes, we want all protection. Just like you protect the money down here, you have to protect our children. And
so let me ask you this,
okay.
Lawanda, did we reduce the school police because we were saying defund the police? Is that what
Yes,
happened?
we did. Yes, that's what I'm trying to explain. We did it. We took 80 million from them. And so now I need it to be put back in when the kids go back. And we got to be praying that our kids make it out within the next 2 weeks without a problem down here. Because we are in a sticky situation here. Because we did take the law enforcement out. We have to put them back into the schools. And we have to come up with ways where we are communicating with those who have issues. Because a lot of people have issues. A lot of people got different things that are going on in everybody's mind. But these are little people. And we have to talk to them because they knowing who got the guns in their home, who's thinking of doing this on the internet. They knowing this. But we got to figure a way of getting this information from them, teaching them how to share this information. Because in every situation, somehow these people told other people, every one of them. So we have to work with this, what we know, and figure out how do we get these others to say something and what's going on. We went through a pandemic, but also when we went through a pandemic, we somehow gave enough money where everybody down here in LA County was able to strap up, get a gun. And I thought guns were very expensive. We had people wrapped around gun stores. But our kids,
the impulse to protect ourselves was pretty evident right there.
Yeah. Our kids didn't go to gun stores. Our kids was buying them off the street somehow. But they had the money to purchase them when they didn't have it before.
Do you remember when back in the day they were talking about how those train tracks that run through Compton, they were just parking them in the middle of the night and leaving them open, and when the people on the street would get onto those rail cars, there would be guns and ammunition, right? And they're saying this is the way that so many guns got into the community. Do you remember that story?
Oh, most definitely. But do you remember the train that just came up 2 months ago with the guns downtown and the guns came up missing?
Yes, I do.
That's what I'm saying. So what are we saying? This is what I'm saying. We have to really look at this and really be dealing with it because we know those guns are missing. They have not found those guns. That being the case, we have to protect our schools, every one of them.
I 100% agree with you, but I think one thing we also have to do is we need to keep it in perspective and understand that these incidents, however tragic they are, and they are it's definitely a tragedy, and it's definitely something that we need to do whatever we can to prevent. But it represents a very, very small percentage of the overall people who are losing their lives due to this violence. And I mean, just in the month of May alone, you had 288 people who were shot and wounded in the city of Chicago. 55 of them were killed. Right? That is a typical month in the city of Chicago. And I think it's important for us to understand the reason why I'll be the first to tell you it's not a gun problem is the city of Chicago has some of the strictest gun laws in the entire country. The state of California has some of the strictest gun laws in the entire country, and yet we had a shooting where an individual who should have been deported here in Sacramento, California, would eventually be released from Merced because California, being a sanctuary state, was released from jail in Merced, and within a few days or a few weeks, shot and killed his 3 children, his 2 children, and an adult at a church here in Sacramento. You had another individual who was in crime, who was in jail for supposedly a part of a 10-year sentence, who was violent offender. And didn't even serve half of his sentence, was out on the streets and was involved in a gang, what only could be described as a gang shootout in downtown Sacramento, where 16 people were shot and killed. I mean, and then you had an individual just right in Orange County who was targeting Taiwan, people who were of Taiwanese descent. I mean, this is in California, where we have, by all accounts, the strictest gun laws in the country. The point is, if people want to do evil, they're going to do evil. What we need to be able to do is, number one, allow people to be able to protect themselves against that evil. And then number two, develop ways in which we can identify those individuals. And in some cases, where possible, get them the help they need before they become violent. And in other cases, make sure that they are not able to commit violence against other individuals.
I agree with you, Craig. Exactly what you're saying. We can't be soft on crime. We have that problem down here in LA County. I'm not trying to get political, but we have a DA that's giving them a smack on the hand as though it's part of the norm. And so I understand what you're saying. We cannot be soft on this crime. Yeah, we have to hold these people accountable when they commit these type of crimes. And I think that's where we have a problem sometimes in our community, holding people accountable. We're trying to find everything to blame this and blame that, and not holding the people who actually.
And it's because the problem is that we're looking at the results, and we're looking at the fact that even though we represent a small percentage of the population, we represent a significant part of the population that is arrested, convicted, and spends time in jail. And so I'm not saying that we don't need to address that disparity, but you don't address that disparity by saying, okay, well, we're not going to enforce the law. We're going to, quote unquote, get smart on crime is the term that they utilize. What we need to do is look at the root causes. What is it that is causing people to to disproportionately be involved in these issues? How do we then redirect them down another path? That's where we need to be focused. Those are actually dealing with root causes. But what we also at the same time have to do is we have to show people that, look, if you make bad decisions, if you make decisions and decide that you're going to be involved in crime, and in particular violent crime, that you're going to have to be held accountable.
Right. So what does that mean? Stronger sentencing guidelines, or what does that really mean?
The latter part is this. How about this? How about if you get sentenced to 10 years, you serve 10 years? How about that? How about we take a look at the things we consider? Yeah. How about we, instead of calling something, instead of doing, like, there are many things that are not considered violent crimes that are in fact very violent. We need to look at those. When someone is before we do an early release of someone who's in for something that's not considered a violent crime, how about we consider their entire history? Has violence been prevalent in their past convictions? All of that needs to be taken into account. We need to, one, enforce the law. At the same time, we also need to be looking at, okay, once again, like I talked about earlier, helping young people, starting from the time they're very young, helping them to make more positive decisions, helping them to deal with their social, emotional health in a positive way, instead of resorting to violence as what now is appearing to be the first alternative as opposed to the last.
Okay,
And
so
holding people accountable regardless to your age or race when you commit this crime called murder. Regardless. The financial
that's a solution.
status.
That's a solution I'm hearing, holding the people accountable.
Yeah,
I'm hearing conflict resolution in the schools. I'm hearing put the school police back into schools. Okay, now how do we stem the flow of weapons onto the streets, though? Like, how does that?
Yeah, one of the things we have to start doing is we have to start actually enforcing laws. Right now, you have home break-ins almost never get investigated, and by the way, that is a significant nationally. That is not an uncommon way in which people obtain firearms illegally, whether it's breaking into cars or it's breaking into someone's home. If you're not investigating home robberies anymore, if you're not investigating car break-ins anymore, then you're not investigating, in many cases, stolen firearms. So that's one of the things, once again, getting back to, enforcing the law. I think the biggest issue that people have, for example, with things like in California, we have the armed prohibited persons list. We have individuals who are not supposed to be in possession of firearms. We need to do a better job of enforcing that. When someone's been convicted of a crime, we need to do a better job of maintaining that database and then making sure the individuals who are legally not supposed to possess firearms actually don't possess firearms, making sure that one, that database is updated and correct. And then number two, that it's acted on.
What would make one not eligible to own a firearm?
Well, there's a number of different things. If you're convicted of a felony,
Mhm.
you automatically lose your right to keep and bear arms. If you are convicted of certain misdemeanors, largely domestic violence misdemeanors, you lose your possession or ownership of your firearms for a certain period of time. I think it's up to 10 years. So it all depends on being convicted of those crimes. If you are the subject of a domestic violence restraining order, you are notified that you lose your right to own or possess firearms while you are subject to that restraining order. Then there's also gun violence restraining orders in the state of California, which I have my own issues with because of due process measures. But that, once again, that's a whole issue for another day.
Mhm.
But so those are the ways in which you can lose your right to own or possess a firearm, at least in the state of California.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. We're seeing so many, these militias are out there all across the country and organized groups that are, activating in hate, right? And so, the right after the George Floyd incident, I know that there was a black militia formed out there in the Midwest. And as a former military man, I do have some I do have some criticisms of their moves, but I'm just saying this. How do we protect ourselves against the whole movement of militias, right? Okay, if we are
Well,
going
okay.
down this, yeah, go ahead, tell me.
I think the first thing to understand is a lot of these militias, and I know people who are a member of certain groups or militias, and they are not actually, in many cases, they're not formed out of hate. They're formed out of love of country. In some cases, you have individuals who are part of these groups that are misguided. That in some cases do have issues, as
Yeah.
you say. I think the biggest challenge that we have is number one, recognizing that people have a right to own and possess firearms. The question is, what are they doing and how are they engaging in that right? And are they doing things that are in fact in violation of the law? I think too often the focus is on those things when the overwhelming majority of violence and violence in general and gun violence as a whole, or violence involving firearms, has nothing to do with militias. Once again, it goes back to gangs and drugs. And basically crime or criminal behavior. The other thing is I think the prevalence of these groups has been accentuated by the internet, because here's the thing. If there are 10,000 people who believe this particular thing throughout the country, in a country of 330 million people, that's not a lot of people. But when they can congregate in one place on Facebook or on Twitter, now all of a sudden, now it sounds like it's a whole bunch of people. And it sounds like no matter how outlandish the ideas that many of these folks have may be, when they're now in an echo chamber, and the sad part is many of these social medias, these technology companies, they silo you to where all you hear is this echo chamber of whatever it is you're used to listening to. And it doesn't matter if you are on the left of the left and you're talking about NPR and Mother Jones and all of that, that's all you hear. If you're on the right and you're hearing Newsmax and Fox News, that's all you hear. And at the same time, if you are a crazy out there person who is hell-bent on revolution, that's all you hear. And the silos, the algorithms of these technology companies feed it so you think that becomes the norm. So one of the things we have to deal with is that I follow media on the right and the left. So if you look at my Twitter feed or my Facebook feed, I've got people from all different stripes. Yeah. So I get a plethora of information. That is not a common thing for people who follow politics and culture in America today. And that's got to become more of a thing.
So when they get more, open their minds, elevate their minds. Yeah. I agree with that 100%. I think, even here at our beach city radio, Beach City Perspective platforms. We're about being global. We are definitely coming from unapologetically Black perspective. However, our news sources are coming from all over the world, we just believe in doing that, and also too just listening to what are they really saying on the right, what are they really saying on the left, so you can have a full rounded discussion. Even look at us here, right here. Got the full range of community care right here, and got the brother here that's down for the gun rights, and then my sister that is advocating on behalf of those who have lost their loved ones in to gun violence. LaWanda, talk about what kind of support. Okay, now that we're in the wake of these tragic occurrences, what would you say to the families at this time?
They're getting ready to go through a spiritual experience like no other. My heart and prayers go out to them. I'm just saying that they just need the support of the community, and they need spiritual prayers. They need to just wait to find out what happened. They need information. But while they're waiting, they need to be dealing with what's happening right now. There's no one solution. There's no one thing that they can just do, because each situation is totally different. Even though they were all killed in that one room, each person is so different. And the family and the relationships and the spiritual relationship that the family may have. Yeah, it's just so intense that it's just unbelievable. And the journey that they're getting ready to go on is going to be something for a lifetime. So I know we're all, praying and saying we want changes right now, but we need to give them some time. We need to really give that family some time, and don't let these people make it political. Don't let them make it political.
LaWanda, a couple of times that I've rolled with you and your organization. I mean, I know we did the 24-hour march across LA, and we did a few other things, and one of the most profound experiences I've had in my community work is holding one of the mothers in my arm while she just sobbed about losing her child. And it was really struck me as if an emotion that I will carry through the rest of my life. It's really, really something. And you're right, they're going through it right now.
Oh, most definitely. Not just the families of the murder victims, but the kids who were also in that room that survived, who actually were victims, who actually seen this. The little girl who rubbed the blood of her friend, just the hearing this, and I can't even imagine a kid in a room. I can't even imagine as an adult being in a room and having something like that happen. It's just mind blowing. And for our kids now, to be part of their life. Not just the kids there, but also the people in Buffalo, the people in Orange County, the people here in LA, across the world, the people in Chicago. It's beyond anything. And it's not normal. Holding them and hearing their stories, and then have the husband of one of the teachers pass away from the heart attack, the broken heart. We don't know if that's the end, because we don't know the other things that are going to happen to them, and who's going to watch and see. Because I know we're here just for this moment, but this is a lifetime for that whole entire community, and it goes beyond that, because they probably got family beyond just that little area in Texas. And we taking it to an extreme that's unbelievable. And it's going to take us building a relationship, because now law enforcement is being questioned, their actions. So it got the community, everybody. It's a lot of issues going on here. And it's a lot for any parent just to have a child. But just 10 years only having a kid. I thank God I had mine 19. But I can't imagine at 10 and 9-year-old. That just breaks you down for any parent to hear something like that and be told to stand outside. That's what I said. We got to wait before we start calling and saying terrible things. Yeah, we got to wait, because we got to find out, how did this happen? And that's why I am demanding that they put school police in elementary all the way to high school. And I'm also asking for those things that you go through that can detect a gun. Now, if we did this special thing through COVID-19, you brought these people out there in front that was testing these kids constantly every day, and you had them in a computer to be able to do it outside. I think we need to have the same thing. And I think the police at the school need to be armed. Yes, they do need to be armed so they can engage anyone. Because see, we in LA Unified School District, we do have kids going up to school with guns. This is going on constantly. And we have to stop it before someone else be a victim of it. And so we have this issue and we can do something about it. We can. We can stop bringing guns. Yeah, we can stop this on our school campus.
You know, Craig, I'm hearing the Prime Minister of Canada suspended all gun sales, you know, trying to get a handle on stuff. Does that something like that work?
No, it doesn't. And that's what's so funny is it's the first, keep in mind, he says he's doing it as a you know, because of what happened in Texas, but it wasn't in this particular case. It wasn't a handgun in Texas. And it goes along the idiom that Rahm Emanuel once said, never let a crisis go to waste. And we've seen what happens when one of the first things that happens when a government disarms its people, it is the first step towards totalitarianism. And I know nobody wants to hear this, but the Second Amendment, I'm sorry, is not about, it's not about hunting. It's not even just about personal defense, but it's literally about citizenry having the ability to defend itself again from all enemies, foreign and domestic, up to and including a tyrannical government. And you look at what happened when you had the truck drivers who were protesting up there. In many cases, they had them arrested. They confiscated their bank accounts. They confiscated their trucks, their property, before exercising another fundamental right, which was the right to freedom of speech. I just think that it is a bad move, and I think in the end is going to wind up costing him. Hopefully, it will cost him his seat in Parliament, or at the very least, his leadership. I think once again we're dealing with a people issue, and the firearms are just a tool, and we ought to be looking at how do we deal with the people problem. And I love the idea of looking at how are we addressing schools and making them safer. The sad part is, LaWanda was, and that particular campus there in Texas, they had a locked gate, right? That individual would not have been able to get on campus had a teacher not propped the gate open so that they could, I guess they were going to get something from their car and didn't want to have to walk around in order to be able. Here's the thing, folks, when we put safety measures in place, when we put things in place, you got to let them work through, right? In many of these cases, in many of these mass casualty events involving firearms, and we look and we find out that there were things that were in place that, if they had been applied, could have prevented this from happening. The shooter up in Buffalo, a year before, he had said that he was going to shoot up his high school graduation. A year before. How is something like this not part of a universal background check?
Yeah.
How was this person able to get access to a firearm?
Yeah, that was.
I mean, this is not new. I mean, the same thing can be said of the shooter there in Parkland. The FBI knew about him. The sheriff's department knew about him. He had a restraining order that was supposed to keep him from being on campus. How was he able to purchase a firearm? Right? Whether it's Pulse nightclub, whether it's what happened in San Bernardino, in case after case after case, we look and we realize that there actually were policies in place that were just flat out ignored. So here's the thing. Here's my policy proposal. Before we do one more public policy, one more new law, how about we start enforcing the ones we have? Let's start putting some of those practices in place. Let's make sure that things like the armed and prohibited persons list, let's make sure that it is accurate and that it is enforced. How about that?
All right. So you're saying to guns don't kill people, people kill people. That's what they say.
I will tell you a joke that I say, look, I've laid my firearms out on the dining room table.
Mhm.
I have spoken very harshly to them. I have reprimanded them. I've even abused them. I have served them alcohol, including bourbon and tequila, and I've left them on their own. And guess what? They have not shot one person.
Ah. Oh, that's funny.
Okay. I'm again going to say we have to hold the
Mhm.
people who
Yes.
pull the triggers accountable.
Mhm.
We cannot be soft on this. Like he
Mhm.
said, policies are in place, but they're being ignored. We
Mhm.
have to hold the people accountable. If we catch you, we're going to hold you accountable.
Mhm.
You got to understand that.
You cannot have justice without accountability.
Yeah.
Right.
And it has to be some form
Now,
of
mind you,
accountability.
there is both mercy and accountability
Yeah.
are required for justice. And we've leaned too heavily on the mercy end, and we've completely started to ignore the accountability end of justice.
Would you all say the early release of prisoners has contributed to the spike in violent crimes in these days and time?
Yes.
In LA County, it has, because LA, I know law enforcement can catch you early in the daytime, say about 9 or 10, like now, with a weapon, and then about 4 or 5 in the afternoon, I got you back out. In LA County, in the afternoon, we can see you come back out, and you're able to go on the street and get another street gun. See, they're not going in the store to buy a gun because they would have to go through all this, registration and all these policies. These people are buying guns on the street. And they're going in the morning, coming out in the afternoon. So I say this early release is creating a problem.
Craig, what's a ghost gun?
All right. So a ghost gun is a made-up term by Kevin De Leon. What they are is they are home-built firearms. These are firearms that, and by the way, you've had the ability to manufacture and produce a firearm on your own at home for personal use. You are not allowed to sell them. If you decide that you want to sell it, you have to put a serial number on it. It has to go through a background check. If you sell more than 5 of them in a year, then you have to actually be a licensed federal firearms dealer as well as a state licensed seller of firearms. But it's something that many people engage in. It's been once again a part of the American lexicon. What technology has done is it's made it so that if you have certain machines like a CNC machine, you can take something like this, which is basically a block of aluminum. Right? This is what's considered a 0%. It's what's called a 0% lower. Right? You can take that and you can convert that into using by the way a $10,000 to $20,000 piece of machinery to produce what's called a lower receiver, or a 80% lower receiver, which still cannot function as a firearm. Now, what you'll then have is people will use a drill press and other tools to then finish that out, add various other firearms parts to it, and then you will have a fully functional home-built firearm. If it does not have a serial number, they consider it to be a quote unquote ghost gun, because without a serial number, supposedly you're not supposed to be able to trace it. But it's actually really no different than a firearm that you can buy from the store, but has had the serial number taken off, in which, by the way, in many cases, we're finding that guns that they're confiscating or they're finding they're calling them ghost guns. No, they didn't have a serial number because the serial number was actually scratched off. It's a red herring. It really is. It's a straw man argument, because very few of these are actually used or involved in in crimes, because it's just a lot easier to go on the streets and purchase a firearm, a stolen firearm, or one that's been shipped into the United States from out of the country. It's a lot easier to do that than it is to go through the process of building a home-built firearm.
Wow, that's fascinating stuff, and yet and still adding to the problems out here on these here streets. So now we're preparing, you guys. We're getting ready to get out of here, but I just want to hear really quickly what you want. Just repeat what you want the politicians to consider as we're in this election season. How does the electoral season season this soup that we have made today?
Well, I'll start if you don't mind.
Good.
Here's the thing I want folks to try and consider. We have seen since the mid 2010s, we've seen a dramatic increase in crime as well as violent crime. And I want you to understand that this is in the state with the strictest gun laws in the entire country. And gun laws have not gotten less strict. In fact, they've gotten more strict during that period of time. Yet we've still seen an increase in violent crime. But here's what we have seen. We have seen the decriminalization of crime. We've seen people who are not just nonviolent criminals, but violent criminals released into the public. And we've seen district attorneys basically say, we're not going to enforce the law. And as a result, we've seen an increase in violent crime, in nonviolent crime, in property crime. All I will say is this, is that we have to have accountability. Start by enforcing the law. And if you want to see the amount of violence going down, in particular, the amount of violence involving firearms, enforce the law.
Enforce the law. All right, Craig, how we get a hold of you out here? Where's your
You
handles?
can find me on Twitter at Craig DeLuz. That's CraigDeluz, all one word. I host a daily news program called The Rundown. 2A News and Conservative Views. You'll find that on Facebook. You'll find it we're on YouTube at 2A News or on OpsLens, or you can listen to us on Spotify Spotify, iHeartRadio, or Apple Podcasts.
All right, very good. LaWanda, what you got to say about it? What do you want the people to know?
I'm going on riding Craig's tail. For us to reduce murder and gun violence here in LA County, we need to have those who are over us, who are supposed to be enforcing the law, to enforce the law. We cannot be soft on this crime. We cannot get those who are pulling the trigger a smack on the hand, say you're going in at 10, you're out by 3, and thinking it's okay. And then saying we're outraged when we see these shootings and killings going on. If we're outraged, then we have to hold these people accountable. If we want to decrease crime, we have to demand that these people enforce the law. If you commit murder, you cannot get a smack on the hand and an ankle bracelet to come home with. That's unacceptable.
Right.
Yeah, you cannot be allowed to do that and think it's okay. And that we're so scared that we got to move our cases out of LA County because we're scared to death that you're not going to enforce the law. And you say you're concerned about minorities, but you're allowing this to go on in minority communities. And we're the number one victim of this crime. We're begging our politicians to enforce the law. Step up and do your job. And quit playing with public safety. Again, this is not a Republican, Democratic, Green. It's not one of those issues. It's a public safety issue. And we want the same consideration that you give to other crimes, other violent crimes, to be given to this. We want a special committee. We want funding. And we want it to be put in immediately. Like we said, we want school police before school started, LA Unified School District, and we want them to be having a gun that is loaded.
Wow, well, there you have it. Justice for Murdered Children, letting you know. LaWanda Hawkins. LaWanda, how do we get a hold of you?
You can get a hold of us by going to www.justiceformurderedchildren.com, or you can contact us at Justice for Murdered Children, 310-547-JFMC. Again, we believe in justice, and it can't be no justice if the law is not being enforced and there's no form of accountability.
All righty. All right. Thank you all, sir, for coming in and engaging in this fascinating and needed conversation, right? We needed this to, come to the village and chop it up of all sides of the issue right here. We've got a lot on our heads here with this crime and this violence all over the country. And thank you, Craig, for coming through. You're still at the barbecue. Look at you.
I know. Well, hey, I want to thank you for having this discussion, because too often We don't hear all sides of the conversation.
Mhm.
And it's important because I'm like this. If you're only submitting yourself to one side of the conversation, you're not being educated, you're being indoctrinated. And only a fool would submit themselves to indoctrination.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a quote. Look, that'll preach right there. All right, Craig. Thank you so much. You know what? Wait, I'm trying to put you. So you said at Craig DeLuz. Before I sign off, I'm just trying to put all of your handles in the chat so that it's a matter of record. Okay, there you are, right there. I think I said it right. Hold on one sec. There we are. Okay, and then you said, okay, perfect. And then you said, LaWanda, justiceformurderedchildren.com.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. All right, before we sign off, and then while I'm doing this here, you guys, you can always see this podcast here on Coffee Conversations with Greg J, and then all of our other associated pages, Columbus Song Coffee Company, when we had Dream Creator, Hannibal Media Group. There's a few others out there where you can catch this live stream. We're also over on YouTube. Help us get our YouTube game up over there, and like and subscribe us. That is Coffee Conversations on YouTube with Greg J. And then also we're repurposing the audio. We'll be up on Spotify, Spreaker, Apple, Google, wherever you get your favorite podcast. Coffee Conversations with Greg J. What a great way to start the week. Thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you all. Remember, you have all these policies and stuff in place, these concepts, but above all that, love one another. That ought to help. Love one another. Peace and blessings.